Okay, so you want to own a thrift store, find a building, put some racks inside, wait for people to drop off their old clothes, sell them for a few dollars each, and keep the difference. Simple, right? A business with almost no cost of goods. Run out of a building that smells like fabric softener and cardboard, except that is almost completely wrong. The real business is not selling old stuff. The real business is managing uncertainty. Every single bag that comes through that back door is a mystery box. Every price tag is a small bet. And every shirt that does not sell is quietly, invisibly costing the store money, whether anyone in the building notices it or not. Here is the strange part. Tomorrow's inventory does not exist yet. Not in a warehouse, not on a container ship. It is sitting in someone's closet right now, and that someone has not even decided to donate it. A normal retailer can call a supplier and order more inventory. A thrift store cannot. It has to wait for humans to clean out their garages. So how does anyone build a business around something this unpredictable? Let's walk through it. Start with the money. A single donated designer jacket can generate more profit than selling dozens of ordinary t-shirts combined. A rare video game, a pair of vintage denim jeans, an old piece of Pyrex glassware that a grandmother bought half a century ago. These are the hidden jackpots that keep a lot of thrift stores standing. Picture a single unsorted donation box. Inside it, 50 completely ordinary garments sit next to one vintage handbag. The 50 ordinary shirts might each sell for $3 to $5. That barely covers the labor it took to sort them, tag them, and put them on a rack. But that one handbag, which cost the store nothing to acquire, can be priced anywhere from $100 to $300. One single sale like that can cover a meaningful chunk of that store's rent for the entire month. This is not an accident. It is the actual financial engine of the business. Most items barely break even. A small handful of items carry the whole operation on their back. Customers are hunting for treasure. The store is hunting for profitable randomness hidden inside completely ordinary bags of donated stuff. Now, where does that randomness even come from? In a normal business, you sign a supply contract. You agree on quantity, price, and delivery date. A thrift store cannot do any of that. Its suppliers are people cleaning out garages, families packing up a house to move, estates settling a relative's belongings, businesses shutting down and liquidating their stock, and ordinary people just doing a closet purge. None of these people sign anything. None of them promise to show up next Tuesday with 40 pounds of clothing. So the supply of inventory does not follow factory schedules. It follows human behavior, and human behavior moves with the economy. When the economy slows down, donations tend to rise because households are consolidating and cutting back, and at the very same time, more shoppers walk through the door looking for cheaper options. When the housing market is hot and people are moving homes constantly, furniture and housewares flood in. And every spring, without fail, cleaning season buries the backroom in bags nobody was expecting. A thrift store manager is not forecasting a factory's output. He is forecasting the mood of an entire neighborhood. Here is where most people get the economics wrong from the very start. They assume donated inventory is free, and free means pure profit. But free is not the same as costless. Every single item that comes through that door triggers a chain of paid labor before it ever reaches a shelf. Someone has to receive it. Someone has to sort it. Someone has to inspect it for stains, damage, or missing parts. Electronics need to be tested to make sure they actually work. Clothes may need cleaning or steaming. Someone has to research the item, decide on a price, and print a tag. Someone has to physically carry it to the floor. And whatever does not sell eventually has to be hauled away and disposed of, which also costs money. Industry data shows that operating costs alone consume somewhere between 40 and 60% of gross revenue in the secondhand retail business. So take a cheap, low-quality garment. It might cost around $2.50 in cumulative labor and handling before it ever reaches the rack. If it sits there for 3 weeks and finally sells for $2, that item did not make the store money. It lost money. The donation was free. Turning it into a sellable product was not. If you are enjoying this so far, take a second to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It genuinely helps. Now think about what that means for the building itself. Customers only ever see the sales floor, the neat racks, the little price tags. What they never see is the hidden factory running behind that curtain. A donation drops into a receiving bay. It gets dumped into a sorting hopper. Workers separate soft goods like clothing from hard goods like housewares and electronics, and anything contaminated or broken gets pulled immediately. Clothing then gets graded, some pieces sorted into a premium boutique section, some into general stock, some into a lower tier bin. Electronics get powered on and tested for safety. Then comes pricing, tagging, and finally, staging the item onto a cart and wheeling it out to a specific zone on the floor. Every hour an item spends sitting untouched in that back room is an hour it is earning nothing while still taking up space. Speed is not a nice to have in this business. Speed is survival. And once an item finally does reach the floor, someone still has to answer an almost impossible question. What is it actually worth? A brand new product has a manufacturer's price printed right on the box. A used product has nothing. How much should a desk lamp from the 1980s sell for? A vintage wool coat? An old oil painting nobody can identify? A secondhand blender that still works fine? There is no catalog for any of this. So stores build pricing systems instead of chasing a perfect price for every single item. Some categories get a flat price, so every basic men's shirt might sell for the same few dollars regardless of brand, which keeps the line moving fast. Some stores build a tiered matrix, so a recognizable mid-range brand gets bumped into a higher price bracket than a completely generic one. And then there is a small category of items pulled aside entirely for individual research, usually rare or luxury pieces, where someone actually looks up what similar items have sold for before setting a price. Get the price wrong in either direction, and there is a cost. Price something too high, and it just sits there, taking up valuable floor space while collecting dust. Price it too low, and a professional reseller buys it in 30 seconds and resells it online for 10 times the price. Pricing in this business is not a science. It is controlled guessing, and the goal is simply to guess well enough, often enough. Neither mistake is obvious in the moment. A price that is 10% too high does not look wrong on the tag. It just quietly sits there for an extra month, and by the time anyone notices, the cost has already been paid in wasted floor space and wasted labor. But here is something worth noticing. None of this pricing complexity seems to scare customers away. If anything, it is part of the appeal, because a thrift store is not really selling clothing and housewares. It is selling a hunt. Unlike a supermarket, where the shelves look nearly identical every single week, a thrift store's floor changes completely every few days. Nobody knows what will be there tomorrow, including the staff. This unpredictability behaves almost exactly like a reward system in a game. Every visit carries a small chance of a big win, and that small chance is enough to bring people back again and again. On top of that, almost everything on the floor is a single unique piece. If a shopper hesitates for even a few minutes, somebody else might grab it. That pushes people to decide fast instead of walking away to think it over. And there is a second layer of satisfaction sitting underneath all of this. It is not just about owning the item. It is about the feeling of getting something valuable for far less than it should have cost. This is exactly why secondhand shoppers overwhelmingly prefer walking into a physical store instead of scrolling online. Well over 3/4 of all secondhand clothing spending still happens in person, inside real buildings, because the treasure hunt simply does not translate the same way onto a screen. So the excitement depends entirely on novelty, which raises an odd question. What happens to that excitement when the shelves stop changing and the same old stock just sits there? It turns out that full shelves are actually a warning sign, not a good one. In ordinary retail, empty shelves mean you are losing sales. In a thrift store, overflowing racks usually mean the opposite. They mean nothing is moving. An overstuffed rack makes browsing physically harder. Customers get tired of digging through clutter and give up faster. And a rack packed with the same old stock for weeks signals, even subconsciously, that this store never changes, which is the exact opposite of what keeps people coming back. So most well-run stores build in a discipline around this. A new item might launch at full price for the first week or so. If it has not sold, it gets marked down by roughly a quarter the following week. If it is still sitting there, another markdown, maybe cutting the price in half from where it started. By the final stage, it might be sitting in a 99-cent bin, or bundled into a fill-a-bag promotion, just to get it out the door before it is finally pulled off the floor entirely. Fast turnover creates urgency, and urgency, more than almost anything else, is what drives someone to actually buy instead of just browsing. Now here is something that flips the entire idea of junk on its head. Value in secondhand goods does not stay fixed. It moves with culture, and it can move fast. An ugly holiday sweater that nobody wanted a decade ago becomes a genuinely desirable vintage piece today. Furniture styles that looked outdated a generation ago are suddenly back in demand for modern homes. Old cassette players, once destined for the trash, are now sought after by collectors. The physical object has not changed at all, not one bit. Its economic value has changed completely, seemingly overnight, but there is a serious complication hiding underneath this trend, and it is reshaping the entire industry. Over the last couple of decades, ultra-cheap fast fashion brands have flooded closets everywhere, with clothing built to last only a handful of wears. Older garments made from decades ago were typically built with heavy natural fabrics like cotton and wool, with sturdy stitching meant to survive years of use. Modern fast fashion pieces are mostly synthetic blends with light stitching, designed to follow a trend for a season and then fall apart. In some regions, as much as 75% of incoming clothing donations are now considered unsellable on the retail floor purely because of this quality collapse. That forces stores to route a massive share of what comes through the door straight to textile salvage, never even touching a hanger. So who is the person actually catching the difference between a piece of junk and a hidden treasure before it lands in the wrong pile? It is not a machine. It is the staff. In a factory, workers physically transform raw material into a finished product. In a thrift store, workers do not really transform the physical object at all. What they create is information. A sorter looking at a jacket is not just checking if it is clean. They are recognizing a brand, spotting real stitching versus a counterfeit, identifying a designer label buried under a plain-looking exterior, or catching that a piece of glassware is actually a valuable vintage collectible. That single judgment call is the difference between an item selling for $4 or $150. An experienced, well-trained sorter can generate thousands of dollars in extra value simply by catching things an untrained employee would miss completely. Which means, somewhat counterintuitively, that training and retaining good staff is one of the highest return investments a thrift store can make. High employee turnover does the opposite. It leads to expensive designer pieces getting priced like garbage, or worthless items getting overpriced and clogging up the floor for weeks. But even the best trained staff can be overwhelmed. What happens when donations arrive faster than any team of people can possibly sort them? In normal retail, more inventory arriving is a sign of a healthy, growing business. In a thrift store, an uncontrolled flood of donations can actually break the operation. When donation volume outpaces processing capacity, the backroom becomes congested almost overnight. Workers end up spending their time just moving unsorted pallets out of the way instead of actually sorting anything, which drags productivity down even further. Storage costs climb because stores may need to rent extra off-site space just to hold the backlog. And in the most extreme cases, stores actually have to refuse donations or temporarily close their drop-off bins, which sounds absurd for a business built on free inventory. But it happens more often than people assume. This is why clearance sales are not a sign that a store is struggling. They are one of the most important tools it has for staying alive. Every single day an item sits unsold, it is quietly consuming rent through the square footage it occupies, and it is consuming labor through the cleaning and retagging it requires. Once that holding cost starts to exceed what the item will realistically sell for, keeping it on the floor becomes a losing bet. Getting 90% off cash into the register today beats holding out for a full-price sale that might never come. Most well-run chains structure this as a cascade. An item might spend its first couple of weeks at full matrix price. Then it moves through a rotation of color-coded discount tags, dropping by a quarter, then by half, then further still. What survives all of that ends up on a 99-cent rack or bundled into a fill-a-bag deal. And whatever is left after that gets sold off in bulk, often by the pound, to bargain-hunting resellers who sort through massive bins looking for anything the store missed. Whatever textiles remain after even that get compressed into enormous bales and sold to salvage companies, who convert them into industrial rags, insulation material, or ship them overseas to secondary markets. Nothing that enters the building leaves without generating at least some value, even if that value is measured in cents per pound. For decades, this entire system worked because local thrift stores had almost no competition for information. A rare item could sit on a rack for $3 because the staff had no quick way to check what it was actually worth anywhere else. That changed completely with the rise of online resale platforms and instant price-checking apps. Now, staff and shoppers alike can pull out a phone, scan a barcode, or search a brand name, and instantly see what an item is selling for nationally. The scale of this shift has been enormous. The global secondhand market is now valued at roughly $289 billion, and it is projected to climb to around $393 billion within the next several years. In the United States alone, the secondhand market sits at about $30 billion today, and it is expected to more than double to nearly $79 billion by the end of the decade, with online resale alone projected to roughly double as well. This cuts both ways for a physical thrift store. On one hand, well-run operations now screen incoming donations more carefully, pulling aside genuinely valuable pieces to sell online at full national market value instead of a bargain local price. On the other hand, shoppers walking the aisles are far less likely to stumble onto an accidental steal because pricing mistakes get corrected almost instantly by a quick phone search. And there is a deeper structural shift happening too. Consumers increasingly sell their best pre-owned items directly online themselves, which means the average quality of what actually reaches a physical donation bin has been quietly declining. So in a world where the best inventory increasingly bypasses the store entirely, what keeps donations flowing in at all? A large part of the answer is trust, specifically charitable trust. Thrift stores generally fall into one of two ownership models, and the difference between them matters more than most shoppers realize. Nonprofit operators hold formal tax-exempt status, which means every donation is technically tax-deductible for the donor. That single incentive keeps a steady stream of free inventory flowing through the door. And because shoppers believe their money is funding a good cause, whether job training programs, shelters, or community services, they are noticeably more willing to accept a slightly higher price tag than they would at a purely commercial store. For-profit operators run a different playbook entirely. Rather than collecting donations directly from the public, many of them sign bulk purchasing agreements with local nonprofit partners, paying them a small set rate per pound of donated goods collected, often just a few cents per pound. This gives the nonprofit partner steady, predictable income, while giving the commercial store guaranteed volume without relying on walk-in donations at all. Over a 5-year period, the largest commercial thrift chain in North America has paid its nonprofit partners somewhere in the range of $490 to $530 million through this exact arrangement. Either way, reputation is not just a marketing asset. It is a direct input into the supply chain. Now here is a question worth pausing on. Most people assume the biggest threat to a thrift store is shoplifting. It is not. The far bigger danger is slow-moving inventory. Every single day an item sits unsold. It is consuming square footage that has a real daily rental cost, plus ongoing labor for retagging, refolding, and cleaning. Multiply that quiet daily drain across an entire backroom and sales floor packed with slow movers, and it becomes clear that the biggest leak in this business is not someone walking out the door with a stolen item. It is hundreds of items just sitting there, doing absolutely nothing, for months at a time. Time itself is one of the most expensive costs in this entire business, and it is almost completely